60 million years ago, following the mass extinction of the dinosaurs, giant snakes roamed the Americas. The biggest of these snakes was known as Titanoboa, and it was just as terrifying as it sounds. Related to modern-day boa constrictors, Titanoboa was a monster. Thankfully, Titanoboa went extinct. But what if it didn't? That's exactly what we're going to talk about right now on Life's Biggest Questions. Is there anything scarier than a gigantic snake? Maybe me when I wake up in the morning. A team of scientists found a Titanoboa fossil at an open pit coal mine in Colombia. The Titanoboa makes modern day anacondas look like toys. According to fossils, Titanoboa was 12.8 meters or 42 feet long and weighed about 1,100 kilograms or 2,500 pounds. But because snake fossils are extremely hard to find, it's not completely out of the question that it could have grown to be even larger. It's believed that Titanoboa ate large turtles and Crocodilomorpha, which were essentially giant crocodiles. The Titanoboa lived in what is believed to have been the first recorded neotropical forest that ever existed, where Central and South America exist today. How did Titanoboa get so big? Well, back during the Paleocene era, the Earth was quite a bit warmer. The average temperature of its habitat was on average about 32 degrees Celsius or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The warm climate allowed for cold-blooded snakes to grow very large, much larger than any snake we currently know of. Even to this day, as you move away from the equator, ectothermic animals decrease in size. Titanoboa became the rainforest's top predator, and for good reason. It is the biggest snake to ever have lived. Titanoboa killed its victims using asphyxiation, where it wrapped itself tightly around its prey and squeezed until its prey suffocated. Once you're in Titanoboa's mouth, there is no escape. Row upon row of sharp, curved teeth that point to the rear of its mouth keep the prey moving toward the stomach. Titanoboa slithered around in water and swamps. Thankfully, it began to go extinct toward the beginning of the Miocene era. But now that you know a little about Titanoboa, let's talk about what would happen if it never went extinct in the first place. First things first, because Titanoboa would need to live in warmer climates, it would only be able to survive in rainforests near the equator. This would be good news for everyone who lived farther north or south of the equator. It would, however, mean bad news for any Central and South Americans that lived anywhere near the habitat of the Titanoboa. Indigenous people in the area like the Aztecs and the Incas probably would have regarded Titanoboa as a god and would have made sacrifices to it. That is, if Titanoboa didn't prey on them. Perhaps Incas or Aztecs wouldn't have even existed. As Titanoboa hunted mostly in water, a way for forest-dwelling people to escape it would be to build their homes in trees. The entire history of Central American indigenous peoples might be different. In modern times, there would of course be hunters who would try to track down Titanoboa for various reasons, perhaps even for food. Titanoboa meat would be considered a delicacy, one food connoisseurs would be eager to put on their plates. But catching a Titanoboa would not be easy. Navigating the difficult, swampy terrain of the rainforest would be, needless to say, hard. But one thing you could do to lure it close would be to set a trap. Crocodiles, the Titanoboa's main food source, also lived until modern day. Set a trap with a crocodile and wait for a boa to come to you. Once it devoured its meal, like most snakes, it would be tired and less likely to attack. This would be the perfect time to strike. At the same time, countless books and television shows would be made about the Titanoboa. Nature shows like BBC's Planet Earth would do everything in their power, even risk lives to get footage of it. It's not likely that it would be kept in zoos. After all, it's huge and it would have to be fed crocodiles. No one knows exactly why Titanoboa went extinct. The main theory is that the temperature of the earth began to cool. The hotter the temperature, the bigger the snake. But the same is true for the opposite. This is because in places where the temperature is constantly hot, the metabolism of reptiles operates sufficiently. The bigger a snake gets, the more energy it needs to sustain it. But once the global temperature began to drop, the Titanoboa's metabolism could not adjust, and eventually, it went extinct. And I'm not mad about it. I don't know about you, but even small snakes scare the crap out of me. The Kraken is a giant monster squid from Jules Verne's iconic book, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It also has its roots in fishermen's tales from Norway and Greenland. The scary thing about the Kraken is you can't see it coming. It waits under your boat in the dark water. Legend has it that if you start catching too many fish, you should row away for your life because the Kraken might be under your boat, scaring the fish so they swim up to the surface. As far as we know, the Kraken is just a legend. But let's imagine for a second that it wasn't. Today, Life's Biggest Questions asks, what if the Kraken was real? The first report of a Kraken came from an account written in 1180 by King Sverre of Norway. Then, in the 1850s, a large squid beak washed up on the shores of Denmark. When a Danish naturalist, Jaap Steenstrup, examined it, he announced that the Kraken was real. The beak belonged to a giant squid, and he called it Architeuthis dux. This is when scientists really began to dig deeper into the legend of the Kraken. Could it be based on truth, or was it really just a fisherman's tale? It is believed that during the dinosaur era, squids may have been 30 meters meters long. Perhaps one of these specimens somehow survived when the dinosaurs did not, and kept breeding. According to fishermen who claim to have seen the Kraken, it was the size of a number of small islands, and its back alone seemed to be the length of a mile and a half. Because of its size, when the Kraken descends back into the depths after sitting on the surface of the water for a time, the motion of its sinking causes a swell in the sea that pulls everything in the vicinity down into the depths with it. Giant squids have long tentacles that they use to grab their prey. Each one of these tentacles is covered in suction cups lined with teeth. If you get snatched by these tentacles, you won't be able to free yourself. Once it has you in its grasp, a giant squid takes small, delicate bites. So needless to say, it would definitely suck to be eaten by a Kraken. So for starters, if the Kraken was real, imagine what that would mean for sea travel. Sea travel was the main way to get around until very recently, especially for the Vikings. If there really was a giant squid, Nordic people may never have invaded much of the world. The entire history of the Vikings might not have occurred. If the Kraken was anything more than a sailor's legend, it is unlikely any of the Americas would have been discovered until aircraft were invented. Let's be honest, if there really was a giant bloodthirsty squid swimming around, there would be mass public hysteria surrounding it. There would no doubt be attempts to track it down and kill it. History would be filled with tales about epic battles between sea monsters and brave sailors. But just because there would be attempts to track the Kraken down, that doesn't mean those attempts would be successful. Cephalopods like squids and octopus are known to be the most intelligent creatures in the ocean. What's more is, they hang out in the deepest, darkest parts of the ocean. If a Kraken wanted to escape, all it would have to do is dive down to where mere humans couldn't reach it. Fast forward to the modern era where there are submarines, and world governments would want to track down the giant creature and destroy it with deep sea missiles. On the other hand, there would also be environmental activists and scientists who would be against this. The Kraken is an ancient, rare creature after all. Studying it would be of utmost importance. How could its species have survived until the modern age? Since the discovery of the giant squid beak in the late 1850s, 21 species of giant squid have been discovered. It is thought that some of these squids could reach 50 feet in length, including their tentacles. But interestingly, none of the discoveries were rooted in an actual sighting of one of these great animals, only a piece of them that washed up on shore. The truth is, no one really knows how big giant squids can grow, and they don't really leave the deep ocean. They spend much of their time 400 to 1,000 meters below, and we've only explored about 5% of the ocean. Who knows, maybe the Kraken really does exist, and it's lurking in the depths somewhere.
The Megalodon was an enormous aquatic carnivore from the early Miocene era to the end of the Pliocene. It was a super predator that preyed on everything from whales to turtles, using his powerful jaws to bite through just about anything in the sea. But what if these enormous beasts didn't go extinct 2.6 million years ago, but remain to this day? Let's explore. Time to ask the question, what if megalodons didn't go extinct? First of all, let's go over some quick facts about megalodons so we're all on the same page. The name megalodon comes from the Greek meaning big tooth, and with teeth over 6 inches in length, the name does not lie. The megalodon looks something like a beefed up great white shark, which is part of why some scientists believe them to be closely related. Reaching roughly 60 feet or 18 meters in length, this beast would be among the largest in the ocean, even longer than a city bus. Due to its powerful jaws, it's able to bite with over 180 newtons of force, which is why it's believed that the megalodon attacked its prey from the side, biting through its body into the vital organs, rather than attacking from beneath like a great white shark. This creature was built to hunt and was an extremely successful predator, preying mostly on large creatures like whales, seals, and giant turtles. But if these creatures were so incredibly fit for their surroundings, how did they end up going extinct? Let's look into it, since this could help us understand them and understand the necessary changes to the world in order for them to survive. Climate change certainly played a factor in its extinction. Not the man-made climate change we've seen in recent years, but the natural, much more gradual change that has been seen throughout the history of the Earth. Global cooling made it more difficult for them to survive in many climates. However, as the temperature changed, many migrated to more suitable areas. Thus, climate change had little direct effect on the extinction. However, this climate change had another effect that did lead to the extinction of the megalodon. By the end of the Miocene, many of the species the megalodon preyed on had gone extinct, and those that survived were more difficult to catch. The lack of food and competition with other super predators led to the extinction of the megalodon. So if we're imagining a world where megalodons didn't go extinct, we would need the food sources, particularly the mysticetes or baleen whales, to not go extinct either. This means that not only would our world have enormous sharks swimming around, but whales would be more diverse and abundant as well. This in turn would mean that smaller fish and krill would have to be more abundant to feed the whales, which in turn would feed the megalodon. But that's not all. The increase in mysticetes would mean that the other species of super predators could also survive. This means that we wouldn't only have to worry about the Megalodon, but other large creatures as well. All this is to say that the addition of the Megalodon would make waves in the ocean's ecosystems. Pun very much intended. But there's another rather pressing question to answer. How would this affect us? Well, if we're looking at how early humans would interact with Megalodons, we could look at the video game Ark. If you play Ark, you'll know that these pesky prehistoric sharks love to strand low-level players on islands. There's nothing more frustrating than swimming to an island only to find yourself surrounded by Megalodons. And this is something that could well have been an issue in the early days of humanity. Since Megalodons tended to reside off the coast, even a trip on a raft or small boat could lead to an attack. However, there were already large, dangerous creatures in the ocean at that time, and the addition of another likely wouldn't have huge effects on humanity's travel across the ocean. Nowadays, the existence of Megalodons wouldn't have a huge effect on humanity as a whole. It would certainly be interesting, albeit terrifying, to see a living one, but we have progressed to the point where we don't really depend on seafaring on small vessels. Perhaps there would be the odd story of a Megalodon attack off the coast, which would of course make the headlines, but the actual odds of this happening would be rather slim. And now we return to our question, what if Megalodons didn't go extinct? Well, if the Megalodon was to survive, sea life would likely need to be more diverse and abundant in order to feed all members of the ecosystem. In terms of its impacts on humanity, it might have been quite terrifying in man's early days, but modern humans likely wouldn't have much trouble with it. That said, I don't know about you, but I might think twice about going into the water knowing there could be a bus with teeth waiting for me.
70 million years ago, during the late Cretaceous period, there lived a giant marine lizard known as the Mosasaurus. Mosasaurus roamed the oceans around Western Europe and North America. Because this was the Cretaceous period, the last era of the dinosaurs, it was one of the last mosasaurids to exist. But what it lacked in timing, it made up for in size. Mosasaurus could reach lengths of 17 meters or 56 feet and weigh 28 tons. Mosasaurus went extinct at the same time as the rest of the dinosaurs, at the end of the Cretaceous period. But what if it didn't? What if Mosasaurus still existed? That's what we're going to talk about right now on Life's Biggest Questions. You know that part in Jurassic World where there was a feeding show and a gigantic crocodile-looking dinosaur ate a great white shark? Yeah, that was a Mosasaurus. Let's say somehow whatever killed the dinosaurs at the end of the Cretaceous period did not manage to get rid of Mosasaurus, and it was able to live on until modern day. The Mosasaurus looked like it was a cross between a whale and a crocodile. Mosasaurus is believed to have lived in salt water, but other types of Mosasaurus have been known to live in freshwater rivers as well. It swam near the surface of the water because, despite the fact that it had rather large eyes, it had poor binocular vision. It also lived near the surface of the water because it breathed air, making it a lizard, not a fish. Even though it had poor vision, it also had a huge double-hinged jaw and massive teeth. Mosasaurus was a carnivore. Its favorite snacks included fish, birds, plesiosaurs, other mosasaurs, and turtles. Its strong tail and barrel-shaped body suggests that it swam around similar to sharks. Mosasaurus was likely at the top of the food chain in the ecosystem. It was so big and its jaw opened so wide, it could eat pretty much anything it wanted. Mosasaurus pierced its prey and then swallowed it whole. Toward the end of the Cretaceous period, plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs began to go extinct, making Mosasaurus the prominent predator of the seas. For this reason, if Mosasaurus had not gone extinct, our oceans would be far less populated. It would likely feed on huge sharks, small whales, and dolphins. Perhaps many of the larger marine animals we currently know of today would not have had the chance to exist at all. Mosasaurus would have just eaten all of them, especially sharks. Mosasaurus loved sharks. The interesting thing is, passengers of a Carnival cruise back in 2014 claimed to have seen a huge creature of some sort swimming near the ship, which was in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico at the time. It became known as the Carnival Cruise Monster, and a passenger named Paul George described what he saw as being a huge monster, 50 feet in length. The creature came up for air, but there was no spouting. It exhaled below the surface of the water like a crocodile. To this day, it's unclear what Paul George saw, but it definitely was out of the ordinary. Perhaps Mosasaurus didn't even go entirely extinct, and they could be roaming around our vast oceans and we would have no idea. Based on this account, one could assume that Mosasaurus could live alongside humans at sea, as long as the boats were big enough. But it would mean bad news for fishermen in smaller boats, as well as people who love to sail recreationally. Mosasaurus's jaw was so wide it could pretty much just swallow a whole boat in one go. That wouldn't, however, mean that humans would have to avoid the sea completely. They would just need bigger boats. Mosasaurus might have been the top predator at the end of the Cretaceous period, but another top predator has emerged since then: humans. Because Mosasaurus needed to come to the surface to breathe air once in a while, that's when it's the most vulnerable, and when it could become a target for fishermen. If Mosasaurus were still alive today, it's likely that a scene similar to the one in Jurassic World would become a reality. We would probably want to keep keep some mosasaur specimens in captivity, both for study and for entertainment. Millions of spectators would bear witness to the mosasaur, the ancient crocodile that managed to live through the greatest extinction event in the history of our planet. Saber-toothed tigers, also known as Smilodons, roamed North and South America for quite some time, along with woolly mammoths. According to fossil evidence, they lived on Earth since approximately 1.8 million years ago. But around 12,000 years ago, during the Quaternary extinction, the saber-toothed tiger went extinct, along with many other animals present during the Ice Age. But what if saber-toothed tigers had managed to survive the mass extinction that took place at the end of the Ice Age, and had lived on until modern day? That's exactly what we are going to talk about right now on Life's Biggest Questions. Saber-toothed tigers are an extinct species of large cat that lived during the Ice Age, or Pleistocene epoch. In fact, they were not actually tigers, they were an entirely different species of big cat. In their time, saber-toothed tigers were one of the largest carnivores living in North America. They were about 5 feet long and weighed 440 pounds. They had short limbs and had the build of a bear. Saber-toothed tigers snacked on large mammals, like elephants, rhinos, and others. Perhaps the coolest thing about saber-toothed tigers are their teeth, but they definitely got the short end of the stick when it came to evolutionary advantages. Sure, their huge canines were up to 8 inches long, but that doesn't mean that they were effective at killing prey. Sabers' huge teeth, as scary looking as they were surprisingly brittle, and they broke very easily. Oftentimes, their canines were completely ripped off during combat. To make matters worse, their jaws were not all that powerful either. Even though they could open their mouths quite wide to an angle of 90 degrees, their bites were not that effective. They were actually a lot less powerful than the jaws of felines of the same size. Sabers' big canine teeth got in the way of biting down with much force, so as cool looking as those canines were, they actually were pretty pointless from an evolutionary standpoint. When a saber-toothed tiger was killing prey, it stabbed its victims with its canines in the neck, stepped back, and waited for the victim to bleed to death. It is fair to assume that if the saber-toothed tiger lived on and hadn't gone extinct, natural selection would have made it so that only saber-toothed tigers with smaller canines would have continued on. You don't necessarily need huge canines in order to kill prey, but if bigger canines were broken off easily, saber-toothed tigers wouldn't have been able to eat anything, and would have died off. Saber-toothed tigers were competing with humans. It was one of the reasons why they went extinct. Combine that with the changing climate at the end of the Ice Age, and it was extremely difficult for them to find food. If saber-toothed tigers hadn't gone extinct, that competition for food would still have been present. It's likely that they would have had to travel away from where humans had settled in order to find prey. They may have traveled farther north, following herds of large mammals to the Arctic or northern Canada. Either that, or they would have had to change their eating habits. Perhaps they would have resorted to eating humans instead of large mammals. Humans were still prevalent, large mammals were not. Saber-toothed tigers hunted in packs. It could have been possible for them to ambush a hunting party of humans. That being said, humans became the dominant predator. Humans would have used the fur of the saber-toothed tigers for clothing and perhaps eaten their meat. If they had not gone extinct, that doesn't mean they wouldn't have been rare and exotic. They would have been revered by royalty. We would have seen them featured in royal portraits of kings and queens. In the modern era, saber-toothed tigers would be protected by animal conservationists. But truth be told, if the saber-toothed tiger hadn't gone extinct, not all that much would change. There are other species of large cats in North America, like cougars. Life may have been different for ancient aboriginals who lived in forests, the saber-toothed tiger's habitat, but it's likely that because humans were the ones who were responsible for their extinction, saber-toothed tigers would have tried to avoid humans completely, living out their existence in remote, colder areas of the globe.
Today we'll be answering the question, what if the Gigantopithecus didn't go extinct? Some refer to these creatures as our real-life King Kong, while others claim it's what Bigfoot looks like. Either way, we're going to be jumping into this one and answering how the Gigantopithecus would affect our world and society if it were to rule the jungle today. Now, it's believed chimpanzees have the strength anywhere between 5 to 8 times that of a human. There's no denying apes in general, gorillas, chimpanzees, and orangutans are incredibly strong. With that being said, to date, one of the strongest chimpanzees that's been in captivity was named Boma. In 1926, Boma pulled 847 pounds using just his right hand. Boma was just 165 pounds himself. Another instance proving chimps' true strength is when a former circus chimp, Suzette, made a pull of 1,258 pounds. It's believed she pulled almost 10 times her weight, meaning she most likely weighed around 125 pounds, maybe a bit more, so we could say up to 150 pounds. So what would that mean in regards to the strength of the Gigantopithecus? Well, they were believed to be approximately 9 to 10 feet tall and weigh around 1,200 pounds. Assuming they too could pull up to 10 times their weight, these beasts would be capable of pulling things weighing over 12,000 pounds. In other words, they'd be one of the strongest animals known to man. But strength aside, their height would also give them an incredible advantage over the likes of gorillas, who can allegedly carry things up to 4,400 pounds. The difference is gorillas are usually 5 feet tall. so these things would be almost 3 times as strong and tall as a gorilla. Although King Kong was written to be over 100 feet tall, the Gigantopithecus really would be the modern day Kong, although Bigfoot would most likely be a better comparison. So now that we got the stats, let's talk about how this beast roaming the land would affect us. As always, it really depends where you live. I feel like I say that in every video, but it's true. In today's society, these things would be living in the likes of India, Vietnam, China, and Indonesia. Meaning, if you lived in North or South America, you probably wouldn't be affected too much. The Middle East and any country in Africa probably wouldn't be affected either. But how would these beasts roaming the grassy lands of India, Vietnam, China, and Indonesia change the way things currently are? For starters, what would these things eat? Tigers? Buffalo? Maybe rhinos? Think again. Based off of the teeth found belonging to these species, there's a widespread belief they ate a lot of bamboo. Although they had incredibly strong teeth and jaws, a large majority were found to have cavities. It seems they would have the same diet as the giant panda. There's also the possibility that these monstrosities ate fruits when bamboo was unavailable. I know, I'm just as surprised as you guys. I thought these things would run the show, but apparently they aren't carnivores. But this also could have been because they were roaming the earth back when the likes of the Columbian mammoth, the cave hyena, and the short-faced bear, which was about 12 feet tall, roamed the earth. Not to say these chimps couldn't hold their own, but if they were hanging out in trees, why go fight for food when it's literally in your home? Nowadays, however, things will most likely be very different. With the likes of leopards and snakes living in the trees, I have no doubt these monsters would make a meal of them. Whether or not they enjoyed it would be an entirely different question, but if a leopard is attacking one of these things, you can be sure it wouldn't be much of a fight. Spoiler alert, I don't think the leopard would win. Now, assuming they stuck to their diet and only ate meat when they were defending themselves, the Gigantopithecus may drive the giant panda to extinction. Clearly, between the two, the giant panda would be seen as a victim if there was an altercation over bamboo, for example. As of now, the giant panda is no longer an endangered species as it once was. However, this would most likely change, assuming not only their food supply slowly diminished, but making it nearly impossible for them to get food if it meant going toe-to-toe with the Gigantopithecus. Like most forest animals, I don't think the countries would have to worry about these animals roaming the streets. Especially considering how they hang out in the trees, they wouldn't want to wander into the city streets. But when it came to tourism or camping or even indigenous tribes living out in the wild, there may be some issues. Anyone who were to get close to these animals could be seen as a threat, and although tour guides, for example, are well equipped with tranquilizers and such to help protect those in case of a confrontational situation, these beasts would change the game. A regular tranquilizer would not be strong enough to take this thing down, nor would 2 or 3, meaning research would need to be done to figure out not only how to control these things in regards to their behavior and how aggressive they are towards humans, but how they could possibly affect the ecosystem in general. Due to their large size, they were believed to consume a lot of food. The reason they went extinct? Loss of food supply and not being able to adapt to rising temperatures. As we know, the temperature keeps rising, which would be seen as an issue for these guys. This could lead to the animals constantly moving to find new appropriate habitats that can sustain them. Unfortunately, even if they didn't go extinct about 100,000 plus years ago, there's a very real possibility they would go extinct in today's day and age based on climate change alone. Now, thankfully, this is a big old what if. These things are long gone, and we're still finding their fossils over 100,000 years later. As we find out more information on these beasts, we'll have a better understanding of their habits and behaviors. Until then, we get to keep making fun hypothetical videos like this one, which makes my job quite fun.
The Leviathan Melville was named after the biblical sea monster, Leviathan. If you haven't read the Bible, the Leviathan was a sea monster, resembling a serpent, that was a metaphor for a powerful enemy. Later on in history, the Leviathan became a term used for a great whale, as we saw in Herman Melville's classic book, Moby Dick. And that's exactly what Leviathan was, a species of sperm whale that's been extinct for about 9 million years, hence the 2 names, Leviathan Melville. And it was nothing short of badass. But if it hadn't gone extinct, would the world we know today be much different than it is? Or would history have changed completely? Today, Life's Biggest Questions asks, what if the Leviathan didn't go extinct? Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, the channel that imagines the impossible. I'm your host, Charlotte Dobre, and this is where I ask you to smash the thumbs up, subscribe, and ask us a question in the comments below. The Leviathan was discovered rather recently. It was first documented back in 2008 when a skull was found at Cerro, Colorado, a desert in Arizona that was once a huge body of water. Leviathan lived during the Tortonian stage of the Miocene epoch, which took place between 9.9 and 8.9 million years ago. Unlike most modern whales, the Leviathan was an apex predator that ate other whales and large marine mammals. For comparison, the sperm whales that currently exist munch on giant squid. Leviathan also had huge teeth, some over a foot long, that would allow it to bite off large portions of flesh. It's likely that the Leviathan didn't even eat entire bodies of the prey that it consumed. Similar to sperm whales, the Leviathan was around 44 to 57 feet in length and weighed up to 50 tons. It is one of the largest carnivorous predators that has ever walked, or rather swam, on planet Earth. Experts believe that the Leviathan was a fighter. It would ram its huge head into other whales. It is also believed that the Leviathan may have come into contact with our old friend, the Megalodon shark. A giant whale actually competed with a giant shark for food. Can you imagine how epic a fight between a giant predatory whale and a massive shark would be? Maybe that's a topic for another Life's Biggest Questions, but back on this topic, the Leviathan's hunting style was similar to orcas, where it would isolate prey, pursue it, and then drown it. Unlike killer whales though, the Leviathan probably hunted alone. At the end of the Miocene era, the world began to cool, which caused much of the food Leviathan preyed on to die. But what if, somehow, Leviathan managed to survive this global cooling and lived on? Firstly, if Leviathans didn't go extinct, we would likely see far fewer modern whales, dolphins, and seals in the oceans. As I previously stated, the Leviathan ate large marine mammals, and it ate a lot of them. Once the Megalodon sharks went extinct, it would have virtually no other apex predators to compete with. The Megalodon shark and the Leviathan lived in the same part of the globe, near Peru, and evidence of both have been found at Cerro, Colorado. Without Megalodon, Leviathan would reign king of the ocean. Because the Leviathan needed a lot of food, it would spend the winters near the equator and follow migration routes to the North and South Pole in the summer. We would see thousands of carcasses belonging to mid-sized marine mammals washed up on beaches with chunks missing from the Leviathan's bite. In terms of human history, there would be a lot more stories, legends, and folktales about Leviathan. Yes, we have Moby Dick, but the sea monster in Herman Melville's book was fictional. There would be far more mentions of a giant predatory sperm whale in Inca history. Perhaps the Incas would have even thought of Leviathan as a god. Tourists that visited Peru along with alpaca merch would be greeted by stuffed leviathans, posters, and memorabilia. Inuit peoples who hunted whales for thousands of years and still do today would have come into direct contact with Leviathan. Whales are an important part of Inuit culture, and entire communities would live off of whale caches. Perhaps Inuit peoples would have not even settled where they did, in northern Canada and Greenland. When they made the choice to live there was no other predators, and food was easy to come by, including whales. This would not be so if Leviathan had not gone extinct. Inuits would have to compete with Leviathan for food. And lastly, let's not forget the Vikings, who would have also had to deal with Leviathan. Norseman kitchen waste from Greenland has been found to be rich in whale DNA. It can be assumed that Vikings would have come into contact with Leviathan, but we don't know much about how they would have interacted, as humans and Leviathan have never lived alongside each other. Maybe Leviathan would have stayed away from Viking boats. Maybe it would have rammed them with its head, taking chunks out of them, thinking they were whales. We just don't know. We can only guess. If the latter is an option, Leviathan would have made sea travel extremely difficult. Otherwise, not much would have been different when it comes to human history if the Leviathan did not go extinct.